On a quiet suburban street just outside Washington, D.C., the Wilson family lived what many people believed was a perfect life. Mary and Nathan were the kind of couple others quietly envied. Their wedding had looked like something from a fairy tale, and ever since then, everything seemed to fall perfectly into place. A beautiful house, a calm neighborhood, and every morning the smell of cinnamon and fresh pastries drifting through the kitchen. When Mary became pregnant with their first child, the couple made a simple decision. She would leave her job and become a stay-at-home mother while Nathan focused on his growing career. For them, family came first. Months later, their son Tony was born. From the very beginning, something about him stood out. He rarely cried like most babies. Instead, he watched everything around him with curious, thoughtful eyes, as if he was quietly trying to understand the world. As the years passed, that curiosity slowly turned into something more. Tony was incredibly smart. One evening, Nathan watched his son carefully stacking toy blocks into a complicated tower that looked far beyond a toddler's abilities. He smiled and said jokingly, "Maybe we should start looking at private schools for him." Mary laughed softly and shook her head. "He's barely a toddler, Nathan. Let's give him a little time." But deep down, they both knew Tony was special. When Mary announced she was pregnant again, Tony reacted in a way that surprised them. He was thrilled. Almost every day, he would place his small hand on his mother's growing belly and whisper things to the baby inside. Sometimes he even stood beside Mary in a strangely protective way, like a tiny guardian watching over her. Mary often watched these moments quietly, her heart full. She truly believed she had the perfect life, but perfection has a strange way of hiding the unexpected. Months later, the day finally came. Mary went into labor late one night. The delivery, however, didn't go as smoothly as they had hoped. Doctors were forced to perform an emergency C-section. Mary was sedated during the procedure, and Nathan, who had always had a strong fear of blood, actually fainted during the operation. Hours later, everything was calm again, and finally, they met their newborn daughter. They named her Marissa. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of medical machines as Mary held the baby, close, feeding her for the first time. Nathan sat beside her, smiling with pride. "Ah, another beautiful baby," he whispered, kissing Mary's forehead. "I can't wait for Tony to meet her." Mary smiled. "He's going to be the best big brother in the world, although I hope he doesn't become too protective." A few days later, they were finally discharged from the hospital. When their car pulled into the driveway, Tony was already waiting outside with his grandma. He had been jumping excitedly on the porch, eager to see his baby sister for the first time. Nathan carefully lifted the car seat from the vehicle and placed it gently on the ground. "Tony," he said with a proud smile, "this is your sister, Marissa." For a moment, the little boy stared at the baby in silence. But instead of smiling, Tony frowned. He slowly shook his head, and then he said something that instantly froze everyone in place. "She's not my sister." For a moment, no one spoke. Nathan blinked in confusion and laughed nervously, thinking Tony was simply being childish. "What are you talking about?" he said gently. "Of course she's your sister." But Tony didn't smile. He kept staring at the baby with a serious expression that seemed far too mature for a 5-year-old. Then he pointed at the infant. "Look at her," he said. "She has light hair and blue eyes." He looked back at his parents. "We all have brown hair and brown eyes." Mary felt a small knot form in her stomach, but she forced a calm smile. "Sometimes babies look a little different when they're born," she explained softly. "She may change as she grows." But Tony shook his head again. "No," he said firmly. And before anyone could say another word, he turned and ran into the house. Mary and Nathan exchanged worried glances. Tony had never reacted like that before, but Mary's mother, Mrs. Callahan, quickly stepped in. "Don't worry," she said reassuringly. "This happens with new siblings sometimes. He's probably just jealous of the attention the baby will get." Her explanation sounded reasonable, and for a while, Mary and Nathan tried to believe it. But days turned into weeks, and nothing changed. Tony refused to call the baby his sister. He barely looked at her. Every time someone tried to correct him, he simply repeated the same sentence with stubborn certainty. "She's not my sister." Mary eventually started wondering if Tony needed to speak to a therapist, but Nathan had another idea. "What if we prove it to him?" he suggested one evening. Mary frowned. "Prove what?" "That Marissa is his sister, with a DNA test." Mary hesitated, unsure if it made sense to go that far just to convince a child. But Nathan insisted. If Tony sees real proof, maybe he'll finally accept it. Reluctantly, Mary agreed. A few days later, they took the test. Neither of them expected anything unusual, but when the results finally arrived, Mary stared at the paper in disbelief. Her hands began to shake. This is impossible," she whispered. Then she looked at Nathan with wide, terrified eyes. "The test says this baby isn't ours."